Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, the economy of the state of Pennsylvania continues to be, well, not very good. We'll get a report on that. Plus, hospitals, the economic impact of the recession on Pennsylvania hospitals, all of that following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, look, we're going to dig deep into the state of the economy in Pennsylvania. We get all kinds of reports about is it good, is it bad. We got two great guests who are going to chat about with us, people in the know. Sitting across the way from me is Dave Patti. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Business Council. And one of our regulars, Gene Barr, he's the Vice President of Government and Public Affairs at the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The titles are done.
Got it. Got that out of the way.
David and Gene. Is that
Absolutely.
Okay, here we go. All right, look. Last week we are told we are in a recession. Now, Gene, it took us a year for someone to say we're in a recession. What's going on here?
Well, it's kind of, you do have to kind of joke about that a bit. It's almost like someone announcing that as of December 41, we were actually in a war. If you talk to Dave's and my members, most of them knew that things have been going down for a while. And things are cyclical. We understand that. But there are serious problems out there, without a doubt. And Pennsylvania is facing those as we move into next year's budget.
Yeah. So, David, look, we've got two kinds of problems going on. We got the sort of the long-term systemic problems, this old economy in transition now for several decades, away from the old industries into, modern technology, service sector jobs, all sorts of other things. But we also have the short-term problem created by this recession. Give us a quick update on the business climate.
Well, I think you're right. And what we don't want to do is do something in the short term that hurts us in the long term. Recently, we did some research. Everybody has their favorite study. This one says the state's great. This one says the state's bad. What we did is we said, what if you put them all in the same kind of pot, stir it up? What do you find out? You find that Pennsylvania's in the middle. Among the 50 states, there are some things we're very good at: basic education, health care, some of our quality of life attributes. On the other hand, things like business taxes, infrastructure, some elements of workforce development, our energy issues are things we need to work on for the long term to be ready when this recession ends, so that the state of Pennsylvania can create jobs again.
Right. Gene, I've been, had the pleasure of going around to a lot of chambers to do, talks leading up to the presidential election, and got to talk with a lot of chamber members. One of the things that keeps reoccurring is a situation with Pennsylvania's roads and bridges, something that I know we've talked about, still remains unresolved. Now, of all the things that I think the business community would say, we've got to make sure we have a first-rate infrastructure, roads and bridges. Talk a little bit about what is the significance of that, and where do we stand with it in terms of getting something done?
Terry, that's a great question, and we've been on this show, and we've talked with you many times about what is the role for government. And I think we can all agree one of the real roles of government is in building our infrastructure. And in Pennsylvania, we have serious problems. We need more money that's devoted to our infrastructure, roads, bridges, highways, mass transit, airports, and so forth. And the trouble is, just focusing on roads, bridges, highways for a minute, there's only a few ways to get that money. One of them is to raise the gas tax, because the monies are going down, people are traveling fewer miles, cars are more fuel efficient, therefore the money's coming in or less. We've got to look at that. We had the option of tolling. That's been knocked out, and there were huge problems with tolling. We understand that. One of the other options is to privatize the turnpike with a long-term lease. Now, whether they come back, I've heard that perhaps those folks are still interested in doing that. We have got to decide which way we get more money into our infrastructure.
David, this is not exactly a good climate to talk about borrowing large sums of money with the private sector. Go ahead.
Well, it's not, but the cost of doing nothing sometimes is incredible too. I mean, if you have a bridge that can't support a truck, we have to get our raw materials and our products out. We have to get our workers to the workplace, which is not only by car but also mass transit in the cities.
Right.
So if we don't fund that, and now because of delays or detours, we're putting 2 trucks on the road because they can only do 1 run a day when they used to do 2. That's increasing the cost of doing business as well. That's also making Pennsylvania less competitive. So we're kind of stuck.
All right, we're chatting about the state of the economy in Pennsylvania. We'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Dave Patti and Gene Barr, representatives of the business community. We're chatting about the state of the economy in Pennsylvania. Gene, one of the immediate situation the state faces is something close to now what is about a $660 million shortfall in the budget for this year. And going forward, we could be staring at somewhere between $2 and $3 billion in shortfalls, meaning a combination, if we go back past recessions, tax hikes and or programmatic cuts. How do you see this situation playing out?
Huge concern to all of us. I mean, you've seen the same things we have. People have said we don't want to do tax increases. We certainly appreciate that, because if you look back to 1991, the last time we had something that was of this magnitude, we created a climate in the business community that arguably we've never recovered from. We hiked business taxes way up, sent a huge red flag to people, don't locate in Pennsylvania. We've got to be extremely cautious about that. As you noted, we're getting close to $700 million right now. Who knows how long and deep this recession is going to be. Therefore, come June, we're not quite sure what it'll look like. There's about $700 million or so in the rainy day fund. Governor Rendell, to his credit, has already announced some cuts.
Right.
But we've got to take a good, long, hard look at that and do more, because Pennsylvania cannot afford to do what we did in 1991.
Yeah, David, you have some experience as you worked in the legislature for many years. You understand that process as well as anybody. Let me go through a couple quick questions. Do you think the state should be just saying, we got the money in a rainy day fund, let's use it to balance the budget? Is that what the purpose of that fund was?
Sure. I mean, the fund was money put away for a bad day, for a rainy day, and we do have about $750 million in there. So that's the good news. The bad news is, okay, that can help us in the first year. When it's zero, the following year could actually be worse than this year.
Yeah. So I think the economists, as I read them now, say that we are only at the beginning stages of this recession. No one has talked about this economy turning around, certainly in the first quarter or two of next year. We could be looking.
Now, there are some people saying, though, third and fourth quarter things.
Right.
And the good news about as much as we can joke about, they just told us we've been in a recession for a year. Is most recessions last year and a half, 2 years. Right. So if we've been in for a year, the good news is we're closer to the end of it.
But the federal government, rightly or wrongly, and boy, there's huge debate over the $1 trillion now that they've committed to bail out. But state governments have been there saying, we want our piece. Governor Rendell recently hosted President-elect Obama. What's your sense about that, Gene?
Well, obviously, there's going to be lots of states with their hand out, and Pennsylvania is certainly one of them. Lots and lots of states. There's only a few that are in good shape. I believe Texas is one that actually is in pretty good shape.
And Alaska, maybe.
Perhaps. Of course, if oil keeps going down, that could change too. But we're going to have to wait and see how all of that plays out, because, as you point out, there are huge needs in infrastructure. It's not as if there's just this money here. We also have needs that have to be addressed.
Yeah, the bad news is that ultimately, as taxpayers, both business taxes and individuals, we're still going to be paying that money, whether it be from the feds or from the state or from our local taxes. So I think we all have to remember that. I mean, putting the clamp down on spending is something that we're all involved in. We all have a stake in saying no and saying, hey, we have to watch the growth right now, or can't have growth.
Well, I may be wrong about this, but during Rendell's first 4 years, when the Republicans controlled the General Assembly, between the Republicans and the Democrats, they increased spending above what Governor Rendell had recommended.
Well, that's a bit of a game, though, because what the governor does is he cuts things in his budget proposal that the legislature loves. And he expands what he wants.
Right.
He allows them, and he signs a budget which they add things back in.
So each get
he's
what
never
they
used his
want.
blue line to take that out.
That's
they both get what they want.
But the bigger point is that the state spending has gone up for whatever the reason.
It has gone up constantly each year, a little bit more than inflation. Now, not grossly beyond inflation, but more than inflation each year for the last several years. And in good times, maybe we can get away with that. These are not good times.
Yep.
And as I said, I think you have to look out for the next 2 years.
So you say 2 years.
In doing that. Now, if the feds want to do some things in the short term, infrastructure financing, for instance, would be great. It creates jobs.
And the other thing is
a market for materials.
we're going to run to a break, but the other point is Medicaid help on the Medicaid side of things.
Medicaid's 20% of our budget.
20% of it. All right, we'll be back in a moment. More on Pennsylvania's economy. We'll bring you some good news in the next segment. We'll be back.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Healthsystem Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program with Gene Barr and David Patti, representatives of the business community, getting their perspective on this recession. So, David, quickly, I mean, the sense is that we just don't know how long this recession is going to be, and therefore the budget this year is going to be maybe one of several budgets that will be quite what we could call recession budgets, right?
I mean, part of what happens too is what we call the lag in economics, where activities that are happening now or not happening now in terms of sales won't really translate to tax revenues till later on. 6 months, 9 months, a year later. Now those companies won't be paying taxes, or those individuals won't be paying taxes. So some of the impact on the state budget has not hit yet, won't hit until much later in this fiscal year and even into the next fiscal year.
Gene, I want to go back to the roads and bridge thing and ask you another question about it. I mean, look, the big issue there, and we all agree, do you agree it's one of the 2 or 3 big issues that the state has to deal with?
Oh, absolutely.
We all agree there.
Absolutely.
I mean, even Democrat. The problem is how to pay for it, not a lack of desire. Do you agree?
Right.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I agree with that. And the trouble is, when you get to roads, bridges, and highways, there's only a certain number of things you can do. And so far, no one has coalesced around any one of those issues.
Well, and it's a lot of money. And it's a big deal. It's a lot of money.
We also have to. We've done some, but we still have to do more about our water systems, our sewer systems. We have to get energy. I mean, we're all excited about Marcellus Shale. But we don't have the pipelines to get the gas out of there anyway.
We're going to do an upcoming program on that.
If we do the wind turbines everywhere, we don't have the power lines to get the energy out of there. So we have
I want to go back to the funding. Gasoline tax. How controversial now that gasoline prices have fallen? I mean, gas prices are really, $45 a barrel, something.
$45.50, correct.
But take it from there. I mean, what is your best guess about what we should do in terms of figuring out a way to... It's almost $1 billion a year.
There are people who have talked about something along the lines of a mileage tax instead of a gasoline tax. The trouble with that is, though, you're still going to have to remit that, whether you do it at inspection time, whether you do it as part of your taxes. And I will tell you, legislators are extremely hesitant to do anything along those lines and get blamed for that. I mean, arguably, you could say this is still an outgrowth of the old pay raise. They're still trying to rebuild. You know what the numbers show in terms of the confidence level and the approval rating for the legislature. So there's a lot of caution there.
But interestingly, the trucking industry says they can live with a gas tax.
Right.
Because they know that they need the roads.
They drive the roads, they know what they look like, and they know the desperate condition they're in. But everything has its pluses and minuses, and again, we've got to start looking at anything we can at this point because the situation is so dire, not only on roads, as Davis pointed out, but on mass transit. We have members who need the mass transit. In terms of our infrastructure on the whole utility side, we need monies into those.
The politics, and that's where interest groups like ours, we maintain the state's oldest business PAC. I have told people a vote for a gas tax or a vote for tolling or a vote to do something, would not be used against you by our PAC. That's something that we, in fact, would look at as a positive.
But now, given the lower price of gas, it would be less politically
viable.
Now would be the time to do it.
Especially with the volatility of the prices. The prices
we're going
so much anyway.
We'll have Governor Rendell, who's due to come back here. We're going to push the governor to see what he has in store here. When the legislature comes back in the spring, I'm sure they're going to be trying to balance the budget. Great update. All right, when we come back, hospitals. The effects of the recession on hospitals have been pretty big. We'll take that up following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, this recession is affecting a lot of institutions and organizations in Pennsylvania. One, the hospitals. Joining me, as often is the case, is Jim Redmond. He's the Senior Vice President for the Hospital and Healthsystem Association of Pennsylvania. Jim, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right, well, look, let's talk a little bit about the impact that the downturn in the economy has had on hospitals. There was a study put out just recently by the American Hospital Association which looked at this impact. Let's talk a little bit about that study and then kind of relate it to the hospitals that you know best, obviously the Pennsylvania hospitals that you represent. What were the key findings that I think are... Go ahead.
Hospitals are really impacted by both Wall Street and Main Street. Hospitals rely heavily upon their investment income because we lose money on actually providing patient care services with some of the payers not paying the full cost. Mm-hmm. So when investment income goes down, that impacts our hospitals. Also inhibits their ability to invest in new technologies and replace their physical plant. And then on Main Street, what you find is that as people are laid off, lose their health care coverage, there's delays in terms of providing or seeking elective admissions and procedures, as well as an increase in uncompensated care costs as people lose their health care coverage.
Yeah. Well, there's some other aspects of this that I know you want to talk about. One is that given all the advances in technology, our hospitals may be a little more reluctant to put in new technology because the money isn't available that could affect patient care. How much of a problem is that potentially? I mean, maybe not in the short run, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think in the short run, it's not as much of a problem. And I mean, certainly our hospitals in Pennsylvania have invested highly in terms of going to electronic medical records, and it's hard to stop something once you've started implementation of those kinds of initiatives. So I think some of those things are going to continue. Acquisition and implementation of other technologies, like computer order entry systems and other pharmacy systems, may be delayed as a result of the economy.
Mm-hmm. One of the things we've talked about over many years is the decline in not in total dollars but percentage dollars in terms of Medicaid funding, which is critical. It's a huge part of the budget of the state, as Dave Patti pointed out. Medicaid spending and the pressure on hospitals, how is that part of this recessionary climate?
Well, it's of great concern. I mean, especially here in Pennsylvania as well as elsewhere. Medicaid program is jointly funded by the federal government and the state government. The state's facing a budget deficit, and as you reported earlier, we're now into the fifth month and close to $700 million behind estimates. That's going to play out in the budget process next spring. And obviously Medicaid is going to be one of the areas that they're going to look at. Now, Medicaid serves almost 2 million people here in Pennsylvania. Interesting enough, most of the money goes for the elderly and chronically disabled people that are not employable.
Right.
So any cutbacks in those kinds of services really impacts our hospitals that provide care to those individuals.
And so as the economy worsens, if it does in fact worsen, more people will become eligible for Medicaid coverage and therefore seek some. You don't think that's...
Really, the welfare reform initiatives that took place during the mid-'90s at the federal level and the state level have almost eliminated sort of the traditional adult being eligible for Medicaid payments. It's really focused much more on children, on the elderly, and those with chronic disabled conditions.
So in other words, but they're the aging population of our state would be, you think, more relevant to this discussion than go ahead.
Absolutely. I mean, The elderly consume a lot more health care. Obviously, if you live long enough, you're going to probably end up in a nursing home. And for many, outlive your resources. So, consider the fact that many individuals that are relying upon their retirement funds that are now depressed as a result of the economy, they could become eligible for Medicaid because they're simply run out of their retirement income.
Yeah. Let's talk about another aspect of this, something that we've talked a little bit over the years, but not a lot, and that has to do with, we often think of healthcare, the healthcare industry, if it is in fact an industry, profession itself, as being a big employer. We know that if you go into the big urban areas, with these huge hospitals, teaching, research as well as patient care, but we don't often talk about how once we get outside of the big cities in rural Pennsylvania, how important the hospitals are in terms of employment for people in those regions, and how that could be affected by this recession.
Oh, absolutely. Hospitals employ close to 300,000 individuals in Pennsylvania. The ripple effect is that probably another 300 to 400,000 are directly derive their income off of the healthcare field. And for many communities, if you don't have a hospital or a good school system, you're not going to be able to locate or keep industries in those communities.
Yeah. So that's another thing we've not talked about. We've talked about the employers. The fact that you employ a lot of people because there's a lot of services that are required to deliver health care. But we've not talked about the fact that if you don't have, we always think about schools. Everybody says, well, go to school. You want good schools, so people will create businesses, and then their kids can go to good schools. Nobody wants to go somewhere where there aren't good schools. But we've never talked about another aspect of this, which is people want access to health care, or they're not going to put a new plan or put...
Certainly, and it relates to younger families who might want to have a family. If you can't have access to an obstetrician or a hospital that provides obstetrical services, it's going to be very hard to locate young families to those communities.
All right, as always, great update. I've learned something. I always learn something from you guys. That's why you're on the program. All right, hey, thanks for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.